Love staying informed? Subscribe now and get unlimited access to local news, weather, and sports for just 99 cents a month for your first 3 months at inforum.news/join. Read every story, listen to every podcast, and download the apps that keep you informed and on the go 24 hours a day. So head to inforum.news/join right now to subscribe. What are you waiting for? Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month at inforum.news/join.
Welcome to Plain Talk. And listen, there's a lot changing in North Dakota politics right now. There's some seismic shifts going on. There's a new chair of the North Dakota Republican Party, someone who has endorsed an independent candidate, Rick Becker, against the sitting U.S. Senator last cycle, despite the independent candidate being rejected by the NDGOP convention. This is somebody who has called for a primary challenger to Congressman Kelly Armstrong. Very much a culture warrior, supporting book bans and all the rest of that stuff. And now is chair of the party, and all her allies. It was a clean sweep. Her allies control the executive committee. They clearly have a majority among district chairs, and so that's where the Republican Party is at right now. And that has some very interesting implications for elections in North Dakota. So here to talk with me about it, along with my Wednesday co-host Ben Hansen, is Pat Finken, who knows a thing or two about winning elections in North Dakota. Pat, how you doing?
Very good. Thanks for the invitation to join you today.
Let's just start talking about this change in leadership at the NDGOP. What do you think?
Well, I think, like all things, governing is often different than when you're an outlier, right? It's easy to stand on the outside, throw rocks. It's another when you're actually in charge of the ship. I think we'll have to wait and see where it goes from here to really understand if there are significant implications or not. Certainly, the ground is set to do that, but you have to see how they act in office as opposed to outside of office. If it follows anything though, like what we've seen in Arizona or Minnesota, and that they use that to try and push the agenda across all Republicans. That has led to Minnesota going to the left. You've got guys like Wolf's winning there. You saw in Arizona this time, which was historically a significant red state, when almost all Democrat, because the people who control the apparatus, the people who ended up getting the nomination, were not people that could win in the general. But like I started by saying, I think we have to see how they act in office. If they start to censure standing Republican elected officials over votes, then we know where they're going with this. And if that happens, and so, there's a lot of those kinds of things we have to wait and see. That also has some pretty significant implications for the state party fundraising as well. So lots of questions yet. We'll just have to see how it plays out. But the history in other states has not been good.
Pat, I have to ask, so you've worked for many Republican campaigns over the years. Were you present at the vote for party chair last weekend or Friday, I want to say?
No, actually, Ben, while I've had something to do with party operations over the years, I haven't really had a big role in that. I've always been more on the campaign side. And that's one of the things people have to understand here is that most of the candidates run their own election apparatus. They don't, there are things that the party can do, like get out the vote or kind of organization at the local level, getting some bodies out, those kinds of things.
Yeah, mail, billboards, yard signs, all that.
Well, they don't do a lot of mail or billboards or any of those things. They've never really had the money. It's always been, we're a little different than perhaps the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party was often centrally funded, whereas here, most of the fundraising for Republicans happens on an individual candidate basis. And I think we'll still see that play out. Now, they may or may not be successful in raising money, but the vast majority of money in the Republican Party is given to individual candidates, not the party as a whole. So, I've never been a big part of the party apparatus, never run for party office. That's not true. I think I was secretary of District 5 in 1982. But being said, I've always been more on the campaign side, which is, I think an important distinction when you look at us versus, let's say, the Democrats.
On the campaign side, I did want to ask, we had majority leaders, Representative Michael Four and Senator David Hoeven on the show about a month ago, I want to say. And at the time, in the district I live in, which, as you know, is District 46, there was a new GOP chair who had expressed lack of satisfaction with one of the incumbent representatives and had explicitly posted on social media that he did not want to see her there. So I asked both Representative Lepore and Senator Hogue, are you going to support your incumbents no matter the outcome of the individual district conventions? And they both gave, to my mild surprise, unequivocal yeses to that question. They said they're going to support their incumbents. They like their caucus. They're going to move forward with their caucus, even towards the June primary, whether or not the district endorses them. That's an interesting, and I would say maybe not unprecedented, but it is a new stance. It's not different than before. Have you had any talk on the campaign side with caucus leaders about, because there are caucus funds that do go to individual candidates. Have you had those conversations? Where do you foresee that going with endorsements versus incumbents if those are different, which I foresee there will be?
Well, I've not talked to Dave or to Mike about this, but historically, the caucus leader and the fundraising committee drive it, and it hasn't always been just for endorsed candidates. In the case of Al Carlson, when he was in, there were several times where he did not support the incumbent. He supported somebody perhaps running out, or I'm sorry, did not support the nominated. He supported the incumbent. So that is not, while it doesn't happen a lot, I'm not surprised that you have to again go back to the fact that the cultures of the legislature is that they support incumbents, that they're not there to be Republicans or Democrats first. They're there to support their individual caucus. I wouldn't be surprised if they found situations where they were more helpful to people that supported their agenda as leader and their role as leader than perhaps who got the endorsement.
Let's talk about party fundraising. I have a story up this morning. There's an FEC report that came out, and we saw $20,000 in donation refunds going to Gretchen and Steve Stenjum. I called them. They didn't want to. Or I called Gretchen Stenjum, Steve Stenjum's wife. She didn't want to comment on that. But it seemed very likely that was a response. They were kind of seeing where the new leadership of the party was heading, and they wanted to get their money out. A lot of people are telling me there's other donors who are going to do similar things. What's your take on that? I mean, is the party going to struggle for? I mean, because again, even though the party doesn't do a lot of stuff, directly for the candidates, it still needs some money. It still has staff. It still performs some functions, and especially, I mean, it seems like the new leadership definitely wants to use the party or try to use what power she thinks the party has to, I guess, try to control candidates or pressure candidates. They're going to need money for that. Are they going to be able to fundraise?
Well, I, like you, have heard that there are some donors who are nervous. I've also heard from some friends of mine who are rather substantial donors who are saying, no, they're not going to be giving money this go around. But again, it's going to play out. Like I said before, if they, embrace governing and function under that kind of environment, then that works.
Maybe some of that money can come back. Maybe some of that money will come back.
Follow the course that we think they might, which is to censure people, oppose incumbents, those kinds of things, then you're definitely going to see that happen, because most of the party donors, the bigger donors, come there via the candidate. The party doesn't drive the fundraising to the candidate. It's quite the opposite. If you look at those donors, they're giving to the state party because they were encouraged to do so by a candidate. And so, again, we have to see how they function. I know that Sandy has said that she's very confident she can raise money, but that, there's been a lot of state chairmen who've said that. There's only been a few that have been successful in that. I remember back, one of the best was Leighton Freeberg. But since then, there have been, that money fundraising piece has been relegated more and more to candidates. And I would tell you today, anyway, that's where the money for the state party is coming from. It's driven largely by candidates. And if there's suddenly, the governor and senators and the House member, especially, the big money fundraisers, if they're getting, pushed around by the state party, you're going to see their supporters not fund the state party anymore.
And it could also be that they could just find their own constituency too. I mean, some of the big donors now may be turned off by this new leadership, but whether we like it or not, this culture war stuff does have appeal, and it does appeal to some people who have money. Maybe they can replace it. I guess that's something we're going to have to watch.
And there are an awful lot of people who agree with them. They've actually had some success in raising money for events and bringing in different speakers, those kinds of things. So yeah, I think the verdict's out. But again, like I said, time will tell, both in terms of how they approach. I will tell you that let's look at the legislature. Ben, you know this. A lot of people rail against spending at the legislature, right? And then go to the legislature and find out that it's very difficult to cut funding, that, there's consequences to that. And suddenly they're not as rabid once they're in office. We're going to have to see how this plays out. If this new leadership group takes on that mentality like they did in Arizona, where they're throwing rocks at anybody that's center right, or even, in Arizona, you can be pretty conservative and still get their ire. If they play it that way, then it's a whole different environment. But if suddenly they see the light, because now they have to win, and the best chances of winning are most often incumbents, then that might change that dynamic a bit.
Do you think there's going to be a cognizance of this with voters? And I'm when I say that, I'm not accusing voters of being dumb or unsophisticated, but when you go to a ballot and you vote, let's take District 8 previous to Representative Becker's retirement. When you're voting for Nicole Poolman and Jason Doctor and Rick Becker, if you choose to vote for that ticket, the three of us on this call would think of Rick Becker as someone who really stands out from his two running mates in that case. I don't know if you're a Republican from North Bismarck, if that really translates to you. If you're not reading every headline and you just hear small government, less taxes, I don't like regulation, some sort of social conservatism, or maybe just platitudes, frankly. I don't know. I can't remember their exact brochures, but you're looking at the ballot itself and all you see is an R beside the name and the office they're running for. Do you think there is going to be a recognition of this among North Dakota voters? Is there enough understanding of who your incumbent legislator is? And that might be a little bit more of a city question. Me living in Fargo, I found that people don't know who their senator and representative is anywhere near as much as like rural Barnes County. They know who Terry Hedlund is. They know that that's their senator. Whether they like him or not, they're aware that that's the senator.
Well, first of all, I don't think party leadership ever has no effect on voting. I don't think anybody says, well, I'm going to vote for or against this candidate because of who the party leadership is. In terms of the individuals, I think you're right. Incumbents and let's be honest, the R behind the name got a lot of people elected the last few years. No question of that. But you look at what's going on, like this last time, there were some R's who got beat. People that had R behind their name because they were that extreme. And while there weren't a lot of them, there were some. And if you look at Arizona, again, as another red state example, it took a long time for the attitude of the party to catch up to the electorate. This last wave of blue votes in the election didn't just happen one time. This has been building for the last 6 years in Arizona. Do I think there's going to be an immediate effect from a huge shift towards social conservatism in the Republican Party in North Dakota? No, I don't think that happens overnight. But if they pursue that and continue to try and push out people who can win elections over people who can't, then there will be a shift over the next few years.
I think that's right. I think the implications here are going to play out over a longer timeline because there's going to be some inertia where, there's been 30 years of Republican dominance because being a Republican in North Dakota means something. It means something in the imagination of a lot of voters. It's a brand. It's like McDonald's. You go to McDonald's, you have certain expectations. You vote Republican, you have certain expectations. It may take a while before the reality if in fact those Republicans on the ballot are going to be very different, it's going to take a while for reality to catch up to that perception. Because it was built over 30 years.
Candidates, either because the incumbent got forced out, or just through the nominating process, we end up with some candidates who can win in a primary, can't win in a general. That's ultimately what happens if we take this too far, is that we end up with candidates who can't win. Let's remember, Tim Pawlenty, a Republican in Minnesota, was governor there not long ago, right? Let's, all we have to do is look back 2 years in Arizona. The governor there was a very widely popular Republican who got forced out of, he was seriously considering running for Senate, but got forced out by this mentality. And if that happens here, then somebody else will be running the show in a decade. I mean, that's just how this works. And that's played out in state after state after state.
And I mean, in particular, I don't understand the Minnesota GOP as someone who was on the eastern side of North Dakota. And, I live next to what was Colin Peterson is now Michelle Fischbach's district. It's much more politically aligned on the conservative side with North Dakota. And I could take, I don't know too terribly much about Arizona politics. I do know the gubernatorial candidate last time was on the kookier side, and I could take either of you gentlemen, put a microphone in front of your face, and set you up at the Blue Earth County Republican Grill in Mankato, and have you off the top of your head spout out 3 things you want to be as Republican governor of Minnesota, and you'd do better than the guy they nominated last time, who was just an absolute. If I were a Republican donor in Minnesota, I'd be beyond upset that these are the people we hire to run statewide for us. And eventually, I don't know if that can happen in North Dakota. When you're winning elections by 40 points, to me, I really think that nomination is it. I don't know how much you could falter at this. But like you said, Pat, maybe if there's 3 or 4 cycles in a row of it, and you start having a Tim Walz-esque, alternative. So, that was a pretty good profile to run on in Minnesota, coming from rural Minnesota, Iraq war, first Gulf War veteran, teacher in Mankato, small town guy, on and on and on. So I just don't see that happening here. If you're Sandy Sanford as a campaign person, how do you go about succeeding where you think she wants to succeed here?
Well, again, it's to find, it starts with finding people that can win in the general. Short term, that's not going to be a challenge. Long term, that can be if we continue to fall to the extreme. That's the challenge before us, because North Dakota is a conservative state, more conservative than most. Yet I don't think they're probably as conservative as perhaps the people that are really getting involved these days. It comes back to something, Rob, you and I have talked about a number of times. This country is not governed by elections. They're governed by the people who care enough to show up at elections, right? And right now, the people that are showing up for the process are the people that take us to the right.
And governed also, I mean, just to expand on that point, governed also by people who show up at elections that happen well before the general election. Right. We're talking about primary elections. We're talking about local district elections. I think to your point about, North Dakota maybe not being as conservative as they think they are, Rick Becker, former state representative Rick Becker, is kind of the avatar for this faction of the party. And he lost at the state convention. Incumbent Senator John Hoeven beat him at the NDGOP convention last cycle. Becker didn't run in June, but then left the party, ran as an independent in November, and got murdered on the statewide ballot. Now, they have some excuses saying, well, he didn't have the R behind his name or whatever, but to the extent that the North Dakota voters knew Rick Becker, they didn't want him. And in fact, they didn't want him so much, they wanted Katrina Christensen, the Democratic candidate, more, which, I mean, all due respect to Katrina Christensen, being a Democrat in North Dakota is a good way to be very unpopular. So, I mean, that's kind of where, if we use Rick Becker as the measuring stick for this movement, you have a faction in charge of the North Dakota Republican Party that is pretty far outside of where most North Dakota voters are, even though we agree they're a largely conservative lot.
No, I think that's absolutely true. And again, that always comes back to, it's not enough to just put up people that are ideologically pure. but to people that can win in the general. And that's where this has fallen apart in Minnesota and Arizona. So back to that point is that this will succeed as long as they either recognize they have to put up people that can win in the general, or if they follow the course of the states like Minnesota and Arizona, they start putting up only people that really pass the litmus test. That's a recipe for loss down the road. It's not going to happen overnight, but that's the direction it goes.
And let me ask you something, since I brought up Rick Becker. This will be a good segue. He is now the manager. I forget he's the chair of a new initiated measure campaign to abolish property taxes. And this is not a new idea. He tried to get a similar campaign off the ground in 2021, and it didn't. And I mean, COVID happened, and they just couldn't collect signatures. So that is what it is. Similar measure got absolutely killed on the ballot in 2012. It was on the June primary ballot that year. I mean, does that issue have North Dakota politics changed enough since 2012 where voters are going to be open to that idea now? And second of all, what does that mean for this faction of the Republican Party? Is that measure something that they can ride to some electoral success? I mean, if Rick Becker also decides, for instance, to run for governor, which I think is probably pretty likely, whether Doug Burgum ends up seeking a third term or not, does it help him?
Oh, no question about that. This is dual purpose. One, it fits his narrative of the last few years that he wants to abolish property taxes, but it also is perfectly timed where he gets to use it to turn out his voters, because obviously people that will vote for this are going to be more likely to vote for Rick. And as a result, I do think it has dual purpose. It's both to achieve that goal, but then also the added value of running. And it will depend on, quite frankly, I'll be interested to see where that lands. If they drop their signatures in time to be on the primary, or if they drop them in time to be on the general. They'll have that option because of when they submitted their initial filing. They'll be able to pick which ones they want to go into.
I think they have to have their signatures done by February next year if they want to be on the June primary ballot, or by April if they want to be on the general.
Right. So they get to decide that, and they can, and very likely they'll drop it so it's on the same ballot that Rick will be, because I do think that plays to hit what he's doing. What's interesting to me about that whole thing is, number one, this faction has long opposed what the legislature has called property tax relief, right? Because it gets absorbed back by the local governments at some point, not immediately, but eventually. And that's what's wrong with this. You go back to the early property tax relief of the 2000s, without some limitation on the spend, anytime you decouple spending from the taxing authority, you're going to have the spenders unfettered. Right, they have no responsibility to how much they spend. That way they can spend as much as they want. That's what's been wrong with property tax relief in the past, is that there's no offset to that to prevent them from just absorbing those decreases in future tax increases. And this bill does much the same. Anytime you decouple, that's going to create a recipe for disaster down the road.
I think, and I'm speaking for them, which isn't fair, but I think the Rick Beckers and the Tony Garrigs of the world, that's a former city commissioner from Fargo, you're an astute observer,
who's on the sponsoring committee for the measure.
Who's on the sponsoring committee. I think they would say, good, now the local officials, school board, city commission, park board, will have to tighten their belts. And that's what we want, because these local guys are spending too much money. And we can laugh about that because maybe we know how much it costs to run a state, but I honestly, for a 30-second ad in a commercial, I could see a pretty broad appeal to that. What would you say to that, Pat?
Well, I think obviously knee-jerk reaction is going to be just that. People in this state, they hate property taxes, no question about it. But let's remember, they hated property taxes a decade ago, and they still overwhelmingly rejected the concept because it was too extreme. If you were to put in some other limitations that would reduce them but not eliminate them, you'd probably have more success. If you put it on just schools, not everything, you'd have more success. I mean, you're talking about making up $1.2 billion a year with state revenue. And that can only happen if we drastically cut the state spending, if we increase taxes, And most importantly, if oil prices remain at $75 to $100 for the next 20 years.
Well, those are incredibly stable and they'll stay the same forever, so we're fine.
Right. I mean, that's the problem with this whole concept. Number one, it's an unstable base. But two, we haven't seen any evidence that local subdivisions actually cut spending when we give them state money. It goes the other way, time and time again.
No, and I do have and it's more of a lefty argument there or reaction, which is, or to that point, which is, there's a lot of these cities. I happen to live in Fargo. I did live in the West Fargo school district, which there's nuances to all of these complaints, but it's like West Fargo's motto is we're a city on the grow, and it's the fastest growing school district in the state, and they're literally adding an elementary school worth of kids every year. Well, with growth does come some spending, there's new sidewalks, there's new utilities to stub in. Do they need to be watched? Does it need to be carefully done? Of course, but it's
there's also a balance.
I mean, when you have a massive population increase, come on, guys, it's not going to be a flat line.
We can accomplish it all with infill, right, Ben?
Yeah.
Sorry, that was my line from Doug Berger.
But the other part of it too. I mean, if you're doing it right, if you're adding an elementary school full of children, you're also adding property taxpayers, and so the burden for the additional, the additional infrastructure needed should be spread out over a larger base. Regardless, I mean, we could debate all day about. I think Pat's point about, the state, if we get rid of the property tax, we create a situation where the state provides the money and the locals spend it, and they have no obligation to be responsible for the taxation. And I guess they could argue, well, the state legislature will hold them to account, which I think has, first of all, entirely too much confidence in our legislature's ability to have a stiff spine and not cave to pressure from local lobbyists. But on the other side, even supposing the legislature does have a stiff spine and they do, limit the amount of money, what stops the locals from raising the local sales tax? I guess they have to go and get a vote for that, but that also then puts upward pressure on local taxes that aren't the property tax. So, or building permits, or all the other ways that they can raise revenues.
Everything both of you are talking about is nuance, though, and I'm wondering if the state's politics have started lacking such a nuance in the last decade. No,
everything. It's a fair point.
We've dropped so much nuance in the way we campaign and the way we politic. Now that might be an old man yells at a cloud, meme, or an old man yells at a cloud, kind of argument. That's not like it used to be. But I wonder now if we see more traction off of this, will we get? I did, Pat. I wanted to ask you one thing as a someone who's been around North Dakota Republican politics for a long time. I don't understand, and maybe this is coming from the background of working within Democratic parties in North Dakota, Minnesota, whatever. To me, there is a unbelievable, and I would actually go as far as say undue amount of patience and tolerance on the part, and I don't think it's in a good way, of people like Doug Burgum or Kelly Armstrong watching their own parties trash them. And we're using other state parties as for instance. If somebody ran, or Ken Martin, who's the chair of the DFL in Minnesota, if someone ran and became the head of the Democratic Party in Minnesota and started trashing on and calling for a primary to Tim Walz, that chair would be gone in a short order. And in my opinion, for good reason, because Tim Walz, and I'm not saying he's a mafia chieftain or he's even a mean guy. That's the head of the party. So don't run for chair if you don't like who we are. Like, what are you doing? You don't get to be on the team. You can run your own person, but you don't get to be chair of the party. That's not how this works. Why is there such either acceptance or just lack of strategy? Because what Rob has been talking about correctly is this is ran by people who show up, or in this case, show up to district conventions. Why are folks like Kelly Armstrong, who just got done being the party chair not that long ago, there's Perry Schaefer in between, but before he was a congressman, he was party chair. Why are they, I listened to him on Rob's show during the interview. He seemed, again, very patient about the fact that someone's coming in to be the chair of his party who's called for a primary for him. Why? Why would you put up with that? Why is that so accepted? To me, it leads to the obvious doom for your party. I don't understand it, but can you explain it to me?
Well, there's a couple of things that go on. I can tell you they're not accepting it, right? The problem you have is the people that show up that vote to put the people in these positions are a very small group of people. You're winning district elections with 80 to 100 votes, right? And so the problem is that the mainstream Republican, like me, is not showing up. That's the real issue here. If you look across the state, there have been a few successes where they've had candidates and district chairs win overwhelmingly with good representation of the district.
Yeah, I won't name names, but in Fargo, I have Republican friends where that's happened, where they've held on to theirs, but they've shown up. But why isn't, maybe not like Doug Burgum himself, but why isn't a campaign apparatus calling up people and just being like, hey, can you please make the meeting? We need these votes, and organizing it and doing it.
Passionate folks. Well, that's how John Hoeven got the nomination.
Yeah,
right?
Where's
John
that
Hoeven
now?
did that successfully, but he has always been an exception to that environment where he's able to rally people to the cause. I mean, if you go back to 2000, we drove people to that convention, and that's how he won. He did the same thing here.
Yeah.
But it's not everybody. Not everybody has that network, has that ability to do it. And the problem is the only people really showing up. I mean, how does Ed Schaefer not get elected to the precinct committee, right? I mean, that's how it come.
Or Randy Chrisman, our sitting public service commissioner, can't be on the.
But Pat, that is mind blowing to me that you call John Hoeven doing politics an exception to doing politics. That's literally what it is. There's no other thing. You're going to pitch for a vote.
Then the difference between you and me is going to be the fact that my people are happy with how things are. They're not driven by politics. They're not out running or getting engaged because they don't like what's going on politically. They just think North Dakota's in a pretty good place and we're doing better than we have ever done. I mean, you got to remember, the party grew to be this because we are the Chamber of Commerce Republican Party.
Correct.
Jobs are plentiful, money, our economy is great, all those things. We're not unhappy. Now, your guys would be unhappy right now, so they're going to show up. But when people are happy, unfortunately, guess what happens? They don't show up.
They get complacent.
They get complacent. I hear that, but to me, that's just a snake that eats its own tail. You're happy right now as a Chamber of Commerce Republican because of policies we put in. So if I'm Doug Burgum or Kelly Armstrong, I'm calling them up saying, hey, you're happy right now because we're Chamber of Commerce Republicans, these policies we put in. If you don't show up, you won't be happy. That's an easy way to generate fear.
I think
get people to come to a convention. I mean, those are campaign basics.
Here's Ben.
You got to come and you got to come to one of these conventions, these district conventions, one time, and really get a feel for who's showing up.
It's Ben Hansen passionately preaching to the choir because everybody on this call agrees the complacency is a problem. I mean, a satisfied electorate doesn't feel motivated to go to the. First of all, they're not tuned in to the day-to-day inner workings of the North Dakota Republican Party. All they know is we have generally moderate Chamber of Commerce style Republican leadership in North Dakota.
Well, I get that.
And I'm happy with it.
One more thing to that, Rob. The other thing that it's not like the party apparatus is an absolute. Kevin Cramer and Doug Burgum showed us that there's another path. If the only way to win is to organize at the district level, maybe they'd be more inclined to do that. But what we've learned is you can bypass the party. You can bypass the district conventions and the state convention and be successful. Nobody did that better than Kevin when he first ran.
So I guess maybe it's like a short-term sugar rush thing where like a Burgum infrastructure sees like we could take out an incumbent like Wade Snedgem, so we're fine. Who cares what happens to like the overall party structure in the future then? I guess.
Well,
kind of.
That's kind of what's going on. But again, Ben, this comes back to the fact that the Democrats have always been more centrally driven than the Republicans in this state. They've been centrally organized. They work together more. Republicans have been an organization of individuals. And so I think that's part of the reason why we differ here. But I'm not happy with if this is where we're going because I see what that does to elections down the road. I'm not overly offended by what's going on in the party, except for that potential. So that comes back to the fact of how do they act once they're in? If they're working against our best interest and the ability to elect both people or put people on the ballot that are both electable, but also good at government, then that's when I'm going to be exercised.
I'm a little exercised by leadership of the party that seems organized around making gay people want to live in Minnesota and banning books. But that's probably a topic for a whole other podcast. Pat, last question for you. I'm hearing from a lot of people, because we've been talking about this. The point you just made, candidates have always been able to just go to the June primary. You don't need anything from the party to do that. You can collect some signatures, and you can put yourself on the ballot to be the Republican nominee. We can argue about whether or not that's how it should be, but that's how it is. Right. So I'm hearing a lot of statewide saying, I don't want to go to the state convention. I don't want to be standing on stage with somebody in the audience or somebody from the stage says something crazy, and now I'm stuck in the video in the background for all time. I don't want to go. They're worried that the new leadership's going to have their finger on the scale, that they're going to get booed, that it's going to be ugly. A lot of them are saying, I'm just going to go to June. Now, it's one thing for them to say that now in the moment when the party just got taken over and tempers are running a little high, but 9 months from now, how likely are they to stand by that?
Well, number one, Ben, I find it funny that you're laughing about that because you have your crazies too. I just want to go there.
Yeah.
But
but when you're in the minority, you need material, and that's great material.
Well, here's the answer to your question, Rob, and that is yes, I'm hearing the same thing. And quite frankly, unless you can go to the convention and win, why would you, right? If you're an incumbent, why would you go to convention and run through that gauntlet unless you're either one of them or can win that, when you can go bypass, what is it, a couple hundred signatures or 300-400 signatures, whatever it is, and get on the ballot there. It's still going to be a race to who gets the R, right? But there are two paths to that. One is the nomination, one is the primary. And I think you'll see a lot of interest in that. Now, again, depending on how this all plays out and how these folks act now that they're governing, will have a lot to do with it.
Well, I think the June primary is probably going to be a pretty busy place because if things are trending the way they are now, I think what we may see is a lot of incumbents going straight to June, facing some primary challengers who were endorsed at a convention that the incumbents skipped. I think that's probably the likely outcome. But we've used up all our interview time. Pat, thank you so much for coming on and lending your insight. As somebody he's retired now in Arizona, so he doesn't even really have a ball. He doesn't really have a dog in this fight even too much anymore.
Oh, no. I'm here most of the year. I just spend the most fun months of North Dakota in Arizona. The rest of the time I'm here. In fact, I'm looking out over the valley behind my house thinking, Jesus, it's really a nice day here. When
you get old, you like your weather to be like your politics, boring, right? I want boring weather and boring politics.
Rob, who's old? I'm sorry, did I miss something?
Well, I'm getting old too.
You spend the most fun months in Arizona. You're going to miss all that great legislative action here. Don't you miss it?
Yeah. Well, again, I didn't do a lot. I never lobbied. I didn't do any of that. I just need to be here for the elections, and then I'm good.
Pat, thanks.
That's my whole deal.
Pat, thanks for your time.
Thanks, guys. Great to see you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chad Kuhl, host of the Northland Outdoors podcast. Hey, here in the Northland, we love our time outside. And on the Northland Outdoors podcast, we're going to talk about all of it. Not just fishing, not just hunting, but mountain biking, camping, rock climbing, bird watching, you name it. We're going to have it on the Northland Outdoors podcast. New episodes every 2 weeks on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. So look for it and join us on the Northland Outdoors podcast.
Just finished up with Pat Finken, longtime Republican operative, he's worked as a political consultant. He's managed campaigns. He's managed ballot measure campaigns. I mean, there's just about nothing in North Dakota politics that he hasn't done. So it's good to get his, objective, take on some of these very strange things that are happening at the party. And it's,
and he gave me some context I didn't know too, that previous chairs had criticized as Republican Party chairs had criticized top level Republican elected officials.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit. We talked about that a little bit during the break, where the thing that happened in the past, I think what makes this different is when a past chair like a Gary Ameneth or a Curly Hauglin would kind of take a shot at a statewide elected official, I don't know that anyone really noticed, because they didn't really have a big movement behind them, right? The politics of the when they were chairs, which would be like the early 2000s and then like the early 2010s, it was a different world back then. The politics hadn't shifted to the degree. Sandy Sanford, like or not, has a very active political or activist movement behind her.
Who will show up to district conventions.
Who will show up and have demonstrated their ability to make a difference. And to move the needle. I mean, they can absolutely do that. So that's, I think, is what's different here. And also you have national figures too. Like, one of the things, I mean, shortly after Sandy Sanford was elected party chair, which is an election, by the way, that usually flies under most people's radars. You had Charlie Kirk, head of Turning Point USA, national,
lots of followers,
make America great again, culture warrior figure. And then you have this, for instance, this is what I want to segue into talking about, is this Minnesota-based group, Center of the American Experiment, which has John Hinderrocker, longtime, very popular conservative blogger at Powerline, is a part of that. And they just issued a study, and I'm reading their headline here. It says, most North Dakota House Republicans vote with the other side. And it's an analysis using a computer algorithm. It's all very facile, right? Like it's all sort of made to look at how nuanced and academic this all is. But what it does is it rated how often the lawmakers voted with each other. And what they found is that most of the North Dakota House of Representatives, 45 of the 84 members who caucus the Republicans, vote more with the liberal members of the House than with the conservatives. Now, at first blush, I think the average voter gets an analysis like that and say, oh my gosh, the North Dakota House of Representatives is super liberal. Because look, it's the ruling caucuses, or the governing caucus is, the Democrats plus a lot of liberal Republicans. The problem with this analysis is that they don't talk about the underlying bills at all. It ignores the fact.
In the press release, is it? Is there a link to it? Okay, full analysis here for the votes, but yeah.
It's not, there's nothing in there about the bills. All they did is they looked at all of the bills the House passed and then did a comparison of how each member voted relative to the other members, ignoring the fact that most of the, like a huge chunk of the bills that get voted on are appropriations bills. So they're budget bills. And there is a faction of the House caucus that votes against all of those consistently. And I think they have the luxury to do that because there's always grown-ups in the House who recognize the fact that they are obliged by the state constitution to appropriate money for the governor's office or the judiciary or higher education or whatever. So they make no differentiation between these bills. They just, they vote with Democrats. And even that assumption, the idea that a vote, if you're a Republican and you vote with a Democrat on a bill, that's immediately wrong, I think is stupid on its face. What if the Democrats' bill is a good bill? What if it's a conservative bill?
Yeah, well, if it's a good bill, you kill it, and then you bring it back next session, sponsored by a Republican. Hey-oh! Have to get it in. But there's 2 points to what you're talking about that I think are well worth knowing for the average voter or the listener here is these, one, to speak directly to what you're talking about, 90% of the time or 80% of the time of the, let's call it an average of 1,000 bills per legislative session in North Dakota, the legislature votes entirely the same. And that's not because there's groupthink. It's not because they're soft-headed or not doing their jobs correctly. It is directly because the vast majority of bills voted on are very, 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 very boring. They're things like we realized that we had a shall where we should have had the word may. Everyone agrees that this was the intent, and we need to make this uniform, but it needs to be voted on. Therefore, 94 out of 94 members in the House vote for it. Now, unfortunately, what that leads to when it comes to silly season in campaign session time is you can take somebody and say, okay, Tim Mathern is a liberal Democrat who represents South Fargo. And now I'm running in let's say a primary somewhere in rural North Dakota. Did you know that, take your pick, Republican incumbent, voted with Tim Mathern 80% of the time? Doesn't that upset you? And it's like, even as a conservative Republican, actually, no, that shouldn't really necessarily upset you, because it doesn't mean you voted conservative. It doesn't mean that you voted the wrong way. And then the second point with these groups, this isn't just the American experiment, although it is an interesting one. We recently had quite a bit of chatter now with on your previous show with, is it North Dakota Right for Life? Is that the
North Dakota Right to Life, based on some of my reporting on what happened.
The name, yeah.
And I guess I could set that up a little bit for maybe people didn't catch the previous show or see the column.
That's a good idea.
It's North Dakota Right to Life, probably one of the biggest groups on the abortion issue in North Dakota, and by their name, you know which side they come down on. They this last session, they and some other pro-life groups did what I perceived to be a very, very smart political move. They said, okay, the Dobbs decision came down, Roe v. Wade's gone, but we want to demonstrate that we have a commitment to pregnant women, right? We don't want abortions. We want people to raise the children. So therefore, let's pass some bills to make that easier. And one expanded TANF for pregnant mothers, one exempted diapers, children's diapers from the state sales tax. Adult diapers were already exempted long ago. So why would we not exempt children's diapers? I don't know. Another one was created a website, like a one-stop shop for, if you're in that situation, say you get pregnant, maybe you're a single mom, maybe you're, economically disadvantaged or something's going on in your life where you need some help. It's a one-stop shop where you go to a website and you can see everything that you could potentially qualify for. It's just some good stuff. Like just
kind of what first thing is for. But yeah, and these are all, and frankly, cost-wise, these are all fairly minor. We made sure and killed any thing that smelled like paid family leave this session. Still, we still kept to our principles on.
We made sure we weren't going to cover do something crazy like cover school lunches for families with kids and school-age children.
And Sierra Heitkamp, who was their lobbyist, and then someone else, but Sierra's the daughter of
former
Heitkamp,
state senator Jason Heitkamp,
Jason Heitkamp. And because you always have to say it, it's honestly no offense to either family. I think they're tangentially related to the Joel and Heidi Heitkamp,
distantly,
but their politics could not be more opposite. It's worth saying.
Yeah, and Sierra Heitkamp's dad. Sierra's not her dad. And her dad, I mean, they're independent. They're independent. I mean, Sierra's her own person, but she was hired by North Dakota Right to Life to be their legislative director.
We're not coming from some left wing background invasion. Right. I could see someone just reading like a Heitkamp working for this group, whatever, and not if you don't know that background.
Sierra Heitkamp's a very conservative person, long involved in state Republican politics.
So, but to your point, they had ratings based on this set of bills. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and say the cuckoo crazies didn't vote for him because they're Jeff Magrum and they're, whomever, and they smelled progress and they made sure to stomp it down. Now, they would say it's because they don't want to spend any money on something and don't want anyone to be reliant on the government in any way, shape, or form, but they basically raised hell. And what we've seen, what they've been willing to, North Dakota Right for Life has been willing to comment on, is that they've dismissed all their staff. There's a major shakeup because of this. And to the broader point I want to make for people who are looking at these surveys and and ratings, when you're a candidate, you get 500 surveys, and very frankly, a lot of them are in bad faith, very bad faith. They are steering questions that are set up from usually opposition parties. And I'll go ahead and say that's a both sides thing. In North Dakota, you tend to get more conservative ones. That at least I experienced trying to snare you in just because there's more money on that side. But I'm guessing in other states there are other ones too. There are ones going the opposite direction where left-wing groups are sending them to Republicans, and they want you to fill out something that looked good on the survey, or it's phrased in such a way, and then they turn around and will put something in 2 weeks before election day that says, "Did you know that Rob Port actually wants to stomp on your puppy?"
Well, I think it's not. It's one thing. It's one thing if you're a single issue group, like if your issue is abortion or your issue is guns or something like that. Then I think it makes sense to you can identify some key votes and score lawmakers on. I think that has some use. I think the problem I have, and what happened with North Dakota Right to Life is essentially there was a group of lawmakers who were from this sort of culture war, MAGA. They voted against those bills. They got scored on them by North Dakota Right to Life, and then they ended up with a less than 100% rating from one of the most visible pro-life groups in the state. Which, if you're a Republican, that doesn't look good for you. Well, it turns out Sandy Sanford, the new chair of the North Dakota Republican Party, is also on the board of Right to Life. Donna Magrum, wife of Senator Jeff Magrum, who, by the way, was the only member of the North Dakota Senate to vote against the diaper bill, I think it was.
Incredible.
She's on the North Dakota Right to Life board, and essentially that was the reason where they got mad at their staff and just canned them all, and now they don't have any staff. And
So,
I'm
to your point, though, is it really good for a single issue voting group? Because look at what this fallout has been. When you take away
I think the thing is, if you're a single issue group, I think it was smart politics what they did. I think what they did, they were very effective. They got their bills through. It was regardless of how you feel about their issue, it was a very good legislative session for North Dakota Right to Life.
Oh yeah. Undeniably,
staff did a great job. So I don't. So
through.
The fact that these lawmakers threw a temper tantrum, I don't think North Dakota Right to Life or anybody else should be catering to these people. Now, obviously, North Dakota Right to Life did, but I don't think it reflects well on the lawmakers. To the extent that people are paying attention to this, and maybe they're not. Again, my audience is not. The audience for my columns and stuff is not the larger. Most people are tuned out on this stuff. This is political nerd stuff. But I want to make a larger point about, because I think it's very much on the agenda for this new leadership of the North Dakota Republican Party to enforce sort of ideological loyalty. And I find it gross. And I understand, people. I want my elected officials to govern in the way that I am, and if I view myself as a conservative, I want them to be conservatives. I understand that ideology is important. The problem I have is some of the assumptions they make about the importance of ideology and the role of a political party in enforcing it, I think are fundamentally obnoxious. In a communist country like China, people who hold public offices are expected to be loyal to the party, not loyal to their constituencies, not loyal to the voters to the extent that democracy even exists in these places. You're supposed to be loyal to the party. And if you're not loyal to the party, you get called on the carpet and you get called in for, what was during the Cultural Revolution in China called a struggle session and something like that. I think that is fundamentally out of step with how the American concept of public service in a republic is. If you're an elected official in the North Dakota legislature, your duty, first and foremost, is to your voters, right? Now, you don't have to be obedient to your voters. Sometimes you have to make an unpopular vote. You have to make an unpopular decision. You do that.
And frequently, there's nuance behind a headline that the voters don't have time for, and hence we have a representative republic.
You cast your votes, and then when election day comes around and you're running for re-election, you explain your votes, and if the voters don't like it, then I guess they vote for somebody else. That's democracy. That's how it's supposed to work. It is not, I vote this way, and the ideologues in my political party call me on the carpet for a struggle session, and now I'm in trouble. To me, I think that's really gross. I don't think it has any place. And I think even if you're very conservative and you're interested in electing other conservatives or whatever, this is not how it works. If you want to move your cause down the field, you've got to engage in some fusionism. You've got to engage in some big tent. There is not enough people in any one faction of the ideology, right? If we think of ideology as kind of a spectrum, or even among conservatives, there's different types of conservatives. I mean, for instance, if I'm Rob Port and I'm elected from District 5 in Minot, which is where I live, and I voted against the book ban, and they call me before this committee, right? The party calls me before it, and they say, well, you violated the party platform. My argument's going to be plank 3 of the party platform is limited government. And I don't think book bans are in keeping with limited government. What they're saying is there's no place for that sort of nuance in this Republican Party. You're going to get called on the carpet if you try to make those sorts of arguments in this Republican Party. And if that's what they're going to do, they're going to narrow the number of people who are allowed to participate, and it's going to lose them elections. Now, That being said, Republicans can lose a lot of seats in the legislature and still have a governing majority, and maybe they don't care.
That is the interesting facet of this. Something I was thinking about when we were talking to Pat Finken was, if I don't necessarily think this is going to happen, but let's say for whatever reason, who knows why, just for hypotheticals, the North Dakota Republicans have a terrible election by their standards in 2024, and they lose 10 Senate seats to Democrats.
Yeah. Now there's 14 Democrats.
Now there's 14 Democrats, which means there are 1 to 2 Democrats on every 7-member committee. Does that change things? It actually does. It actually does change things on a nuanced level, but it doesn't change gavels. It doesn't probably change the narrative to Joe, Jane, Q public voter. And I guess my broader point with these things, because I hear what you're saying about the parties, but for me, I think the point also needs to be made that for the voter trying to do their research on a candidate, because they tend to be used for last-minute campaign materials 2 weeks before the election.
To talk about these like scorecards and stuff.
These scorecards, these ratings. To me, I just think that it's something that you should shy away from when you're using it to judge a candidate, even on single issue votes. And let me give you one quick Minnesota example here that is directly relevant. Minnesota Right for Life tended to endorse Jim Oberstar. He was the congressman from the Iron Range. It was north of Duluth. He was the chair of the Transportation Committee in the House. He represented a very Catholic, very union heavy area of Minnesota.
He was kind of a Kennedy Democrat, maybe you could say.
Yeah, and he represented the district very well. It was a socially conservative, fiscally actually pretty lefty, like rural lefty sort of district. And he voted pro-life as well. And then one year, Minnesota for Life just stabbed him in the back and endorsed the Republican candidate, even though literally they couldn't give you a single vote where he had voted the wrong way on their supposed one issue.
Yeah.
But they just wanted you to vote for the Republican. And that was a breaking point because there were a lot of pro-life DFLers in rural Minnesota. And it was a breaking point in their culture where they went, why would we even bother trying to appease you? You want us to vote for your thing so then you can work against us in an election. Why would we bother?
Well, I think that's because that's kind of the point that I'm trying to make. Because if it's this thing where it's all about absolute loyalty to the party and not your constituency, ignores.
And there can be no nuance. There can be no exceptions to anybody,
it's almost like the goal is party loyalty and not good policy. I mean, the whole point of this exercise is not the dominance of the Republican Party. It's governing our state well. Which is why I find it just odious going back to this American experiment, which they're started in Minnesota. I guess they've got a North Dakota chapter now. But going back to this comparison where it's like, voting with a Democrat on a bill is immediately a bad idea. Well, what was the bill? Tell me what the bill was.
You know what? Actually, here's my point I should have made with you and Pat earlier that I was steering towards, and now I've kind of figured out more of the words to it when I was talking about someone like a Kelly Armstrong or a Doug Burgum pushing back on someone from the party. I think my big problem, or something that would make me very unsettled if I were them, and I don't have Kelly Armstrong or Doug Burgum's exact political ideology, and nor is anyone expected to, nor does anybody care. But if I were them, I'm seeing a element take over my party that is not of supposedly what I am trying to bring to the table here. If I'm in leadership, I'm not just thinking about my time in office. I'm thinking about my state and long-term generational bringing more folks up into either the political party or, more importantly, public service in the future. And if I watch somebody like Sandy Sanford, who, again, from this POV, I'm not agreeing with her, right? I'm taking the hypothetical viewpoint of Kelly Armstrong or Doug Burgum. Why aren't I doing something to actively push back against that? And Pat, Pat's kind of saying, well, our people are happy, so you don't have to do it. And it's like, well, use the vision or the fear, frankly.
I think his argument was
like they're threatening something that we have built, so why wouldn't I want to keep building on it? And instead, you're letting it.
But he was agreeing with you. Like when he said that, it wasn't like we're happy, so we don't have to do anything. He's saying we're not doing anything because we're happy, and he doesn't like that. He was agreeing with you. The people, it's complacency and short-sightedness. I think there's a feeling where the Democrats are not a threat right now. Just about in most of the state, whether we're talking about a legislative race and certainly the statewide races, the Democrats are not a threat. I was just writing, if Doug Burgum doesn't run for governor again in next year, because he's running for president or he just doesn't want to run again, then I think I wrote about all the potential Republicans, and I was trying to think, who's a Democrat that could run? I don't know. I saw the Bismarck Tribune mention Heidi Heitkamp coming back and running again. I think that's unlikely, but who knows?
I don't take it out of consideration if somebody really far out there does it. I don't know if she's interested anymore. I have no idea. I don't know. I don't
know how to handicap that, but that's literally the only name that I could come up with in North Dakota Democrats who could mount a credible challenge to somebody like a Kelly Armstrong or a Doug Burgum if he runs again. I just don't.
I kind of, in my mind, I'm like almost, see, you can't know who's going to win the primary, but in my mind, I'm almost like, never mind. I'm really interested in what happens if a Tom Campbell or a Rick Becker takes the convention. And I actually think Tom Campbell, sorry, I'm diverting the point, but I actually think a Tom Campbell is really interesting.
Yeah.
Because I think he could shore up a lot of the Rick Becker.
Former state senator ran for the House in 2018, a big rival of Kelly Armstrong. That was a very heated convention fight between those two, and it got a little ugly.
And I'm one to talk, but I think it was a mistake on his part to not run for the primary that year, because to me, if I were him, I could have made a very easy argument. I've ran hard for however many months now. Yeah. I've got the money to do it. Let's see who the best person is after Burgum, and Cramer set the precedent of whoever wins the primary wins. So why didn't he go for it? And I think he might be regretting it now. He's got the money and he's got the effort to put in. I think he could take the Rick Becker faction without being Rick Becker if he plays his cards really right.
He could be Rick Becker without the baggage, I guess.
Yeah.
And by the way, there are so many moving parts to this. I realize if you're listening to this and your head's kind of spinning, when I was writing that piece about, hey, who could run for governor if Doug Burgum doesn't? I mean, first of all, just the laundry list of potential Republican candidates was long. I'm over 1,000 words into this column, and then I start thinking, okay, but if Kelly Armstrong runs for governor, well, who runs for the United States House? I mean, maybe Tom Campbell decides I don't want to take on Kelly Armstrong. Maybe I run for the House. Maybe Rick Becker runs for the United States House because now all of a sudden it's open. So there is so much going on. It's very confusing.
Tom Campbell confirmed his interest with you, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, no, I talked to them directly.
I want to say, much like Kelly Armstrong, good for Tom Campbell. You asked him and he was like, yep, I'm looking at it. Good for him.
Yeah.
Instead of doing the weird,
I think it was,
maybe I will. I'm not thinking about that.
Tom Campbell is...
I appreciate, I might do this.
Tom Campbell has picked up, even at times where I've been a little critical of him, Tom Campbell's always picked up the phone every time I've called, and I never feel like he's... I think Tom Campbell is another person who is kind of like Kelly Armstrong, kind of like Kevin Cramer, a little recklessly honest. He's very open, very North Dakotan. Doesn't have now. Maybe if he gets some paid consultants around him, they'll put some body armor on him and he'll be a little less open. But no, I like covering Tom because I could just call Tom and he'll talk to me, and it's always been that way. So that's a good thing. All right,
I know we're pretty much out of time. Sometime next time we got to start getting into Doug Burgum's campaign apparatus and starting to turn him into just generic GOP candidate. XYZ. Well,
I have a column. I started writing it before the podcast, and I'm going to finish it. He had a piece come out about they hate us, about rural America or whatever.
And the media. He's starting to jump on that bandwagon too.
Well, it's funny because Burgum at his I mean he kind of positioned himself as the anti-culture war candidate. This is a direct quote from his speech announcing his candidacy. He said, I quote, "We've become a country of neighbors fighting neighbors." Now he's sending out a fundraising pitch saying they hate rural America. Yep. These are incongruous statements, but you could if you're listening to this, you can go find that column. It'll be published probably by the time you listen to this. Thank you for listening. We'll talk again. We're gonna have another show Friday. I know Chad Hoeven and I normally do our shows Friday. We didn't do a show Friday last week because Congressman Armstrong couldn't come on until Monday, so we did a Monday show. But we'll also have a Friday show, so stay tuned for that. As for what we're talking about on that show, probably some of this stuff again. I don't know who the guest is going to be because I kind of fly by the seat of my pants with this stuff, as Ben knows by now.
Double the Chad Hoeven now.
Double the Chad Hoeven. See how it is.
Getting crowded out over here. Try to come in and pitch hit.
It's gonna average out to once a week, Ben. Calm down. All right, we'll put a pin in it there. Thanks. Did you know Forum Communications Company has a robust podcast library? At inforum.com/podcasts, we have everything from politics, sports, true crime, outdoor adventure, and more. Visit inforum.com/podcasts and explore them all today.